Metro 2. There are rumors that beneath Moscow, there's a secret subway that isn't on the map. It's called Metro 2, and it's a secret network that, according to the story, was built under Stalin and codenamed D6 by the KGB. Its tunnels are buried 164 to 656 feet deep, and they are said to link the Kremlin, security headquarters, a government airport at Vnukovo 2, and even a sort of underground town in the Remenki district. Officials have neither confirmed nor denied the existence of Metro 2, but the little paperwork we have does show something suspicious. There was at least one confirmed deep line that got under KGB control and was upgraded with blast doors, its own power and air systems, and even a reinforced vehicle hangar. These stories gained more credibility in 1991 when the US Defense Department put out a paper that included a diagram of a secret shelter network under Moscow, with space for thousands of people. Then, in 1994, an urban explorer group claimed they had found a way inside, but it's also not confirmed. Hints have also come from Russian insiders. One presidential advisor said Stalin had his own single-track line from the Kremlin to his dacha, and a former minister spoke of an extensive network of tunnels and an emergency command center. A union leader of the metro remembered drivers being quietly recruited to run secret routes with short trains behind locked gates. Today, the public can only visit related sites, such as the Cold War Museum at Bunker 42, which is a real protected command post connected to the metro, even though it's not part of Metro 2, if it exists. The most famous rumor is the underground city at Remenki. People point to fenced buildings near the university and speak of 15,000 beds and supplies for 30 years. It's very likely that Metro 2 does exist, but we have no way to confirm it, since no one is allowed access. Ploutonion at Hierapolis. This place has such a peculiar phenomenon that for years people thought it was the gate that led straight to hell. They noticed that this ancient Turkish city had a cave that couldn't be approached. Nearby animals collapsed and died almost instantly, and birds that flew too close fell to the ground and died. There was a particular ritual, though. Priests, called the Gali, would go down into the cave and come back unharmed. This gave them enormous authority, as they were seen as having divine protection. Visitors would pay the priests and ask questions, then the priests would go down into the cave to seek answers from the deities themselves and come back with the answer. What helped spread this version is the fact that the entrance of the cave was actually hot, with a sulfur smell, as if hell was really down there. With the spread of Christianity, the gates were sealed, and earthquakes in the 6th century destroyed what was left. However, in the 1960s, Italian archaeologists rediscovered the cave and a restored statue of Hades with his three-headed dog, Cerberus, which once stood at the entrance. Most importantly, we finally got an explanation of what was really happening all this time. The cave gave off poisonous carbon dioxide gas. The priests probably survived by staying where thin pockets of oxygen existed, or maybe just by holding their breath for a long time. To this day, you can't get near the cave, as it's still emitting huge amounts of poisonous gas. RAF Menwith Hill. This place is known for its giant white domes, which make visitors curious, but they can't go near them because it's actually one of the most secret listening stations in the world, and some even call it the largest electronic monitoring station on the planet. This place is called Royal Air Force Menwith Hill, and it's a UK base, even though it's mainly used by the United States. It's used to communicate with satellites, listen in on signals from around the world, and detect missile launches. The antennas hidden under those white domes connect to satellites operated by the National Security Agency. Menwith Hill has long been linked to Echelon, a global interception system, and it is one of 3 major US satellite monitoring stations in the world, working closely with another famous base, Pine Gap, in Australia. They chose this place because the location was perfect, quiet radio conditions, and a good angle to listen toward Europe and the Soviet bloc. Nowadays, they even have backup plans to destroy sensitive equipment if needed, such as during an invasion. Some critics argue that this base enabled too much mass interception. The European Parliament itself investigated Echelon and worried about privacy and commercial spying, and activists have protested at the fences since the 1980s. The fenced area now covers about 605 acres, and more than 1,000 people work there. Getting in is basically impossible. They have a central unit that can quickly send out armed officers, and since June 1st, 2007, the station has been legally protected, so trespassing there is a criminal offense. Mount Athos. There's a whole peninsula where basically half of humanity is not allowed to set foot. Mount Athos, known as the Holy Mountain in northeastern Greece. This place is ruled by a community of Eastern Orthodox monks and protected by a rule that bans every woman from entering, including female domestic animals with the exception of cats, as they're useful for hunting mice. This ban is not only a religious tradition but also law, since the Greek government recognizes Athos as a self-governing part of the state under the monks' authority. The monks call it the Garden of the Virgin Mary, and the story goes that the Virgin Mary's ship once drifted to the peninsula during a storm. She loved the beauty of the place and asked Jesus for it to be hers, and a divine voice answered that it would be her garden and a place of salvation. According to the monks, this is why from that moment on, no other woman was to enter. Getting in is not simple, even for men. Athos controls its own border, complete with a fence about 5.6 miles long, and daily visitor numbers are strictly capped. Only 100 Eastern Orthodox laymen and 10 non-Orthodox men may enter per day, and all of them need a special permit. Permits usually last 3 days, and extensions require approval from within Athos itself. One interesting thing is that even though Athos is legally part of the European Union, it has a special status that lets the monks enforce their entry rules, including the ban on women, despite being under EU and Schengen law. Monks come mostly from Greece and Eastern Europe, and when they are admitted as novices or full monks, they automatically receive Greek citizenship. If you were to go inside, you'd find an ancient world that has guarded itself for more than 1,000 years. Monks have lived here since at least the Byzantine era, around the year 800. This is why it holds priceless treasures, such as icons, relics, rare books, ancient documents, historic farm buildings, protected forests, and diverse wildlife. In 1988, UNESCO named it a World Heritage Site. The European Parliament once called for the women's ban to be lifted, but the rule remains in place to this day. Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Hidden inside a mountain in Colorado, there's a place almost no one is allowed to go, and there is a very good reason for that. The Cheyenne Mountain Complex is one of the safest and most protected military bases ever made, costing more than $142 million. During the Cold War with the Soviet Union, the United States needed a command center that could survive nearly anything, even a direct nuclear explosion. So they decided to hollow out the inside of a mountain and build it there. The complex is buried under 1,970 feet of hard granite rock and covers 5 acres of space. Inside, there are 15 buildings, each 3 stories tall. These buildings are not placed directly on the ground, but instead rest on more than 1,000 huge springs, which absorb shock if there is an earthquake or an explosion. Basically, this base could survive a nuclear explosion powerful enough to wipe out an entire city. To get to the main part of the base, you would first have to go through gigantic blast doors, which weigh 25 tons each. Beyond them is a system of defenses that includes special air filters to block chemical weapons and radioactive particles from a nuclear attack. Once you are inside, you would find everything people need to live for an incredibly long time, without ever leaving. There are reservoirs filled with millions of gallons of water, massive supplies of fuel, backup generators, food stores, a cafeteria, and even a gym. Due to how secure it was, during the Cold War, this base was the headquarters of NORAD, where the United States and Canada worked together to watch the skies for any signs of Soviet missiles. It was here that one day, a simple error almost triggered World War III. Someone accidentally loaded a simulation tape showing what a Soviet nuclear attack would look like, but the people watching didn't know it was a test. They thought it was real. The screens showed thousands of missiles heading toward the United States, but luckily, the mistake was discovered in time, and no nuclear weapons were launched in response. In 2008, most of the daily work was moved to a nearby base called Peterson Air Force Base. But in 2015, the US military spent hundreds of millions of dollars to move more systems back into the mountain, as it provides protection against EMP attacks that shut down electronics. The mountain is surrounded by state parks where people can hike, have picnics, or play ball games, but no one is allowed to go too near the actual base. Porton Down. Porton Down is one of the most secret places in the UK, and it's been tied to some of the most controversial experiments in history. From the outside, it looks like an ordinary science campus, but it's way more than that. Entry is tightly controlled, and maps label the surrounding area as a danger area, warning people to keep away. In 1916, during the First World War, its construction started after Germany began using chemical weapons. At first, it was just a few huts for testing chlorine, mustard gas, and phosgene, but it quickly grew into something much bigger. After the war ended, the government decided research into chemical warfare would continue, so permanent laboratories were built, and that's when research into the really deadly substances started. When the Second World War started, they studied stockpiles of sarin, a nerve agent used by the Germans that the British had not yet discovered. They also tested some of the most used biological weapons, like anthrax and botulinum toxin, but some of these experiments went too far. For example, the Grunard Island experiment in 1942. They dropped anthrax on that island, and it spread so much that it killed off the sheep and remained in the ground for decades until they had to flood the island with disinfectant. Everyone was completely banned from stepping foot on that island until it was completely disinfected. Then, in 1952, Porton Down helped in the development of VX nerve agent, one of the most lethal chemicals ever made. Unfortunately, human trials took place here. Servicemen were exposed to nerve gases so scientists could study the effects. In the 1960s and 70s, it even carried out open-air trials, such as spraying bacteria off the coast of Dorset, which only became public knowledge decades later. The site also became home to samples of some of the world's deadliest diseases, including Ebola, anthrax, and plague. It's so secret that even Parliament has admitted it cannot know everything that goes on inside. Surtsey Island. One November morning in 1963, a brand new island suddenly appeared in the North Atlantic Ocean. From that moment on, it became a place almost no one is allowed to step on, for a very interesting reason. The island is called Surtsey, and it sits at the southernmost point of Iceland. It was born from an undersea eruption 427 feet below the surface. It's basically like a whole other new alien planet on Earth. And for the first time, scientists could study how life begins completely from zero without people disturbing it. For that reason, only a tiny number of researchers are allowed to land there, and even they must follow strict rules. They carefully check their clothes to make sure there are no crumbs, seeds, or any trace of food, and anything foreign has to be removed. Once, a tomato plant started growing from waste accidentally brought by a person, and it was immediately removed. Surtsey is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but the island has been shrinking. Today, it's less than half its original size because the ocean keeps wearing it down. It's believed that most of Surtsey will sink below sea level by around the year 2100. The discoveries made here so far have been fascinating. The first vascular plant appeared just 2 years after the eruption, while mosses came after 4 years, and lichens after 7. For years, only a few plants managed to survive in the poor sand, but then birds began nesting, and their droppings enriched the soil, helping vegetation spread fast. Soon, seals started coming ashore and breeding there, and insects arrived almost immediately, blown in by the wind. In 1974, a floating mat of grass drifted to the island carrying hundreds of small invertebrates, leading to the arrival of slugs, spiders, beetles, and even earthworms. By 2008, scientists had already recorded 69 plant species on Surtsey. Ise Grand Shrine. The Ise Grand Shrine, considered by some as Japan's holiest shrine, has one of the most off-limit zones in the world. We're talking about the 2 inner sanctuaries surrounded by wooden fences, dedicated to the sun goddess Amaterasu and the grain goddess Toyuka. People believe the sacred mirror, one of Shinto's most important treasures, is kept here. What's incredible is that this entire shrine is rebuilt every 20 years in a ritual called Shikinen Sengu, where the old sanctuary is carefully taken apart and a brand new one is built right beside it on an empty gravel plot. Everything is made according to strict traditional rules by master carpenters using only hand tools, but the most interesting part is the center of the shrine, which has the pole around which each sanctuary is built. This pole is never seen, and when a new shrine is built, the central pole must be covered immediately. It's also why photography near the gate is banned, and why those fences are there. Another interesting fact is that the shrine is closely linked to Japan's imperial family, as the chief priest or priestess must come from the imperial line. Today, the high priestess is Sayako Kuroda, daughter of Emperor Emeritus Akihito. Over centuries, this shrine was huge in Japanese pilgrimage. For example, in 1625, records say 3.62 million people came in just 50 days to see the outer parts. Today, more than 100 priests live there. Diego Garcia. Diego Garcia is a perfect tropical island in the middle of the Indian Ocean, with white sand and blue water, but no one can go there. It's an entirely off-limits island. Since the 1970s, it has been a joint military base run by the United States and the United Kingdom, and to build it, the UK forced out the Chagassian people who lived there. The reason why it's so protected is that the base became the most important US bomber hub in the Indo-Pacific. The US Navy calls it the footprint of freedom. Years later, international courts and organizations looked at what had happened with the Chagassian people, and in 2019, the International Court of Justice ruled that the UK's control of the Chagos Islands, where Diego Garcia is, was illegal. The United Nations agreed, but Britain said the ruling did not force them to act. Then things changed on the 3rd of October 2024, when the UK and Mauritius announced that the islands would be given back to Mauritius, while Diego Garcia would remain a base. After talks with the new US government, the UK signed the official agreement on 22nd May 2025, which transferred sovereignty of the islands to Mauritius. At the same time, though, Mauritius leased Diego Garcia and a 24-mile buffer zone back to the UK for at least 99 years with an option to extend, so the base could keep running. Mauritius could begin resettling people in the rest of the islands, but still not on Diego Garcia. Also, the base is so far away from any mainland that it runs on its own time zone. There are darker accusations too. For years, human rights groups and officials said the island or nearby waters were used for secret detentions. In 2008, for example, the UK admitted that 2 American planes used to secretly move prisoners had stopped to refuel on the island of Diego Garcia back in 2002. If you want to discuss this video or suggest an idea for the next one, join my Discord, link in the description.